Oh shit, we're going to rejoice, everyone. We're back with another Sekhie Reacts to Fate. I'm unprepared.
I think I'm just going to leave that in to see how long it takes. Everyone can see. That's the funniest shit. Anyways, happy October, everyone.
It's bratwursts. October.
Oh, I was going to say it's spooky season. Spooky season. Which means we've got a collection of servants this month that are monster adjacent. We did better getting, the idea for October has always been monster adjacent, spooky adjacent, so like ghosties and demons and beasties, oh my. But you sort of run a little low on
We
that.
only have so many traditional monsters to go around without tapping into all of our Cthulhu mythos at once.
So obviously we're talking about the greatest monster of all, Theseus.
The Greek hero.
Greatest monster of all is a pretty accurate description of this man. I mean, I'm gonna be real here. Like,
I don't know. I think Jason was significantly worse.
Ariadne.
Yeah.
Ariadne. Anyway, but we are talking about Theseus and the Minotaur, Asterios or Asterion, as you might have guessed by our, very covert hints from the last video about taking the bull by its horns and possibly needing a thread to follow.
Was it obvious enough?
I don't know if we could make it more obvious. I don't know if that's possible. I feel like we made that so obvious that because both of our hints referred to both of the characters. So, I do want to mention, Theseus is a really interesting character in Greek mythology because, we've talked a little bit about the Odyssey before on this channel. We've not done Odysseus. Upcoming, not soon. But he is on the schedule. But we obviously Epic the Musical has been coming out, and you know me, and I've been all up in the Epic stuff, and I have to read the Odyssey for school repeatedly, again and again and again, and I love the Odyssey and the Iliad and that kind of thing. Fun fact, how many Athenian heroes were in the Iliad?
A lot more than there should be.
Actually, the answer is virtually no named heroes at all were Athenian in the Iliad. And that's one of the reasons why Theseus was created, according to some scholars. Some scholars believe that Athens created the myth of Theseus as the founder of their city and the heroics he did in response to the fact that they were one of the only city-states in all of Greece that didn't have named heroes participating in the Iliad. Almost every other major named city-state had heroes participating in the Iliad. Also, when you think about the Iliad, Menelaus and Agamemnon, that's Sparta and the areas in the Peloponnese. So traditionally the Athens versus Sparta, that sort of thing. So it's a little funny, Theseus, and obviously we don't know if this is the case, but a lot of scholars do believe that Theseus is essentially an Athenian response to the fact that they could claim no glory from the story of the Iliad. Because they don't really have any named heroes in it.
So he was a diversity hire.
Yes! And also, in many ways, many Greek heroes are flawed. Many Greek heroes are flawed. Theseus does not break this mold.
No.
Theseus is flawed.
It's almost like if you retell the story a million times, some fucked up things happen in there.
Just a few, So Theseus is, of course, theoretically the most famous for the slaying of the Minotaur. But that is not the only myth he is involved in. He's got kind of a collection of them along with his own set of labors. A la Heracles, because gotta compete with Heracles somehow. Gotta compete with all those other demigods from other city-states because Athens is the best. I'm being a little jaded here. The person who was created because they didn't get glory from the Iliad. Which, not necessarily, we don't know if that's true, but it's a funny concept, It's kind of like the Spartan Helen, who's a backstabbing, betraying bitch. as opposed to like Helen, who was kidnapped by Paris and Aphrodite, and largely kind of not really involved with the whole Trojan War thing. Okay, so Theseus was obviously born in Athens. His parents were theoretically, Poseidon is named as one of his parents, along with Aethra, that's his mother. But he's also been attributed, according to some, not attributed, but I mean, he is the son of the king of Athens nominally, right? So, like, his mother is the queen of Athens. And so, like, Poseidon's his father, but Aegeus is also his father, right? Because that's just how that works. What?
We're really working with Punnett squares here, aren't we?
Yeah, well, is it a Punnett square if you have to put 3 sets of jeans on it? Instead of 2.
I mean, I could barely fit into 1 set of jeans. You kidding me?
I'm not wearing jeans. Fuck that. Despite the fact that he is the son of Aegeus as well as Poseidon, Theseus was not raised by Aegeus. He's actually raised by his mother far away, and ends up, after finding out that he is nominally the son of the king, travels back to Athens, having adventures, right, as he's traveling. This is where a lot of his myths as a young man are created, while he's traveling to Athens. When he reaches Athens, he finds that Aegeus is actually married to Medea, right? We've talked about Medea. This is actually Medea, the former wife of Jason, right? Who also, piece of shit, my guys. Like, let's be honest. And Medea is not too happy about his appearance, right? Because his appearance basically means that, there's someone with a claim to the throne that isn't her and potentially her children. And she's like, I'm gonna murder him.
Being fair, this is not the least small concern.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely not. Especially with the way Medea's been treated. I don't feel bad for Theseus at all. Eventually, Theseus would end up creating the Synechismos, right, which is the united rule of Attica under Athens.
Let's also be fair to Theseus here on the Medea part, though. I don't believe in this Medea part that Theseus was the outright aggressor in any given situation.
No.
He didn't come and like, I am taking the throne from your children.
No.
I believe a lot of it ended up being Medea doing little petty things and then eventually trying to poison him or his father.
Yeah.
It was him.
Pretty much, yeah. There's several Roman and Greek historians have wrote on the life of Theseus as like a king. So Pausanias said that on the slope of the Acropolis he established a cult to Aphrodite of all the people. And Plutarch writes extensively about his life, because Plutarch literally has a book called The Life of Theseus. And Plutarch's book, The Life of Theseus, is meant to parallel the life of Romulus, which is the Rome's founding myth. So Plutarch is literally writing a founding myth of Athens to rival, not to rival, but to be compared to the life of Romulus, which is pretty interesting. We don't have any evidence that Theseus was a real person, but if he was a real person, he would have been probably like Bronze Age era, like maybe like 7th to 10th century BC. You could probably narrow the dates down a little bit more, but like definitely Bronze Age, which fits with like when you think, because all of the other stuff like the Odyssey, the Iliad, like the Greek heroes, that's all like pre-classical as well, because you have to think those myths were being told in the classical period, so it's all pre-classical. Some of it's attributed to even older than Bronze Age, so it makes sense.
I feel like you can almost feel the fan fiction aspect in these early Theseus stories. Well,
yeah, and I think it's because a lot of the records we have of like the earlier age come from rather than come from like collections of myths passed down, it's more so like the stuff like Life of Theseus, which is definitely written to be a narrative, and therefore you have to kind of fill in the gaps in the myths that existed, but like what you fill in still has to fit with the character you're trying to write or the person you're trying to portray. So you do end up having to like.
But like the labors of Theseus. Well, I wonder where you got that one from, or Guess who Theseus's big foe is when he gets home? Is that Medea?
Well, I mean...
Let's not forget that sometimes he's considered an Argonaut, depending on whether you read the Detective Comics run or the New 52 run.
I can't with you. I can't with you. So, we'll start at the very, very beginning. Zeus slayed his father, and I'm not gonna pull a Chin Shi Huang on you and go back 7 generations, I promise. So, Aegeus, remember, the primordial king of Athens. Aegeus was childless. He and his wife had trouble conceiving, and they were not able to provide an heir. So he decided that he would go ask the Oracle of Delphi. And you have to keep in mind, this is basically what people did when they were struggling with something in ancient Greece. You would go and you would ask the Oracle of Delphi, and then she would sit over a pit of noxious fumes that made her high and tell you things. I'm sorry, she would channel the voice of Apollo, the giver of prophecies, and tell you things. I'm being a little shit about this. I'm so sorry. So, what she said to him was something along the lines of, don't open the gaping mouth of the wineskin until you've reached the height of Athens, or you will die of grief. Right? So he didn't understand this. I barely understand that, and I've had it explained to me. So he asked, and he had been hosted by the king of Troezen at the time, Pythias, and he asked advice from Pythias. Now Pythias, understanding the prophecy, according to him, got Aegeus wildly drunk, and then gave him his daughter Aethra. And I mean wildly drunk. So, but while he was drunk, he dreamed, and he was given instructions in that dream. No, sorry. I hate this. I hate when the gods get involved because it's so complex to try to remember who does what. So, Aethra was instructed in a dream by Athena that she should leave him drunk and sleeping and go to the island of Sphyra that was close to the shore of her father's home, where she would pour a measure of wine to Sphyros, who was the charioteer of Pelops, and Poseidon, right, to be possessed by the sea god in the night. This mix would then give Theseus the combination of divine and mortal sort of genealogy that was present in him, giving him double paternity. So he'd be the son of Poseidon and the son of Aegeus. So Aethra became pregnant, and Aegeus decided that he would go back to Attica now that he has an heir on the way. However, before leaving, he buried his shoes, sandals, and a sword under a very large rock, telling Aethra that when their son grew up, he should move the rock, take this for himself, and bring it to Athens to prove his royal parentage. So he wasn't taking Aethra with him. He was leaving her there with her father in Troezen. So in Athens, he would marry Medea, who had left Corinth after killing her children, and take her as his new wife. So Theseus was raised in Troezen with his mother and his grandfather. And when he was a young man, he moved the rocks, picked up his father's shoes and sword, and having done this, his mother then told him about his father's identity and that he needed to go to King Aegeus and claim his birthright. So he had 2 ways to make this journey. He could go by sea, which was arguably one of the safest ways at this point, or he could go by land, going around the Saronic Gulf, where there were actually, according to Greek mythology, located 6 entrances to the underworld, guarded by chthonic enemies. And of course Theseus was like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go the really dangerous overland route guarded by the 6 chthonic enemies. Because why? Why would I go the relatively safe and easy way of, taking a boat when I could walk? Never disagreed with someone more. So these 6 entrances to the underworld and their enemies are what myths would call the 6 labors of Theseus. So the first site, which was Epidaurus, Epidaurus is a site that's sacred to Apollo and Asclepius. It's today it's the site of one of the greatest and most well-preserved ancient theaters in all of Greece. It actually hosts a festival every year called the Epidaurus Festival, where you can go see modern plays performed on stage sitting in the ancient theater, and you can see ancient Greek plays performed while sitting in the ancient theater. I actually got to visit this last summer, and it was really fucking cool. Although
Greek or modern? Or did you see a play?
I did not see a play at the Epidaurus Theater because the only play that we could go see was playing at like 8 p.m. at night on a work night. And it's like an hour and a half drive out there and then an hour and a half back in the middle. It just, like a couple of other people did, but I know myself and I was not going to be able to work 8 hours on like 3 hours of sleep. Like, it just wasn't going to happen. I would like to go back someday and do it because I think it's like quite an experience. But I did visit the theater. I did get to sit in the seats. I did visit the temple to Asclepius. There's a really funny thing when the archaeologists originally found it, they found this section kind of in the back of like one of the ruins. And they were like, oh, this is a temple to the Egyptian gods. It's a Roman cult to Isis, Osiris, and Serapis. But later archaeologists determined that it was actually just the private bathhouse of the head priest. So it's like on the maps, it's so funny because on the maps on site, they haven't been updated in like decades. So the maps on site still label it as like the sanctuary to the Egyptian gods, but all the information about it is like, yeah, this is a bathhouse. So it's just really funny. So Epidaurus, and then at Epitharus, his enemy to face was Periphetes, a man wielding this giant club, who would beat his opponents down into the earth. Obviously, he succeeds. The next entrance into the underworld is the Isthmian entrance. So this is the Isthmus of Corinth, which is like it's the tiny bit that connects like the Peloponnese and sort of like the southwestern part of Greece to like Attica. Where Athens is. So it's actually like a really narrow corridor. Now there's actually there's an Isthmus of Corinth canal that goes through it so that ships can transit without having to go around the entire... Although the canal is very small. When I say ships, I mean like a large sailboat. That's about it. Like a motorboat that could comfortably fit maybe 40 people. That's about it. I was also there this summer. I took a bunch of photos. Maybe if I can find one of them, I'll insert a photo into the video right here. I mean, I could just look it up, but I could also go find my own photos of these things. So at the Isthmian entrance, he had to fight Sinis, also known as Pityocamptes. Pityocamptes means he the one who bends pine trees. So he had this thing where he would tie travelers up between two pine trees, bend them to the ground, and then bend them to the ground and then let them go to tear the person apart by the ropes that were binding them to the two trees. Theseus actually slew him using his own particular form of execution, and then seduced his daughter, Perigoun, fathering Melanippus, which, by the way, Theseus has a fair amount of kids, like over the course of these stories. There's like a fair amount of them. So like this is not going to be the only time that he sires a kid in our stories. So to the north of the isthmus, after passing it, there's another entrance to the underworld called Chromion. In Chromion, he kills the Chromionian sow. Does that sound familiar? Like the Erymanthian boar? I see what you did there. This basically giant pig had been bred by this old lady named Phaia. Or, according to some versions, the cow itself is Phaia, transformed into a cow. Supposedly it was it could have also been an offspring of Typhon and Echidna, the father and mother of monsters, basically, according to Pseudo-Apollodorus's Bibliotheca. So, but giant fucking pig. Killed it. So, passing Megara, his next enemy was Sciron. Sciron would force travelers along the pathway, which was on the edge of a narrow cliff, to clean his feet. And when they knelt down to clean his feet, he would kick them off the cliff behind them, where they would be eaten by a giant turtle that was living at the bottom of the cliff. Theseus just pushed him off his own cliff. 100%. Good for them. So the next one is at the holy site of Eleusis. Eleusis is also my bane, because when I was at Eleusis this summer, I sat on a cactus. Fully sat on a cactus.
1,000 years of pain.
You know what the worst part is? Eleusis, it's like an hour and a half from Athens by public transit, and we were taking public transit because we didn't want to pay. So I sat on a cactus, and then I still had to walk all over the city, down to the seashore, and then ride the bus back.
Wile E. Coyote. Super genius.
So, and Eleusis is also the site of the Eleusinian mysteries. So there's a twice yearly cult worship to Demeter and Persephone, and the story of the journey to the underworld. So like the priests would go down into this little cave and like come back out, and people would get, we think, raucously high for an entire week and do all sorts of inappropriate things for an entire week or two every year. The greater and lesser mysteries. So at Eleusis he faced Cercyon, who was the king at the time. Cercyon's thing was that he would challenge people to a wrestling match, and if he beat them, he killed them. That one's pretty simple. He challenged Theseus to a wrestling match, he didn't win, and then he got killed. Fair.
Straightforward.
Exactly. So the last person that he had to fight in his 6 labors wasn't actually very far from this. It was in the plains of Eleusis, so like the plain area between Eleusis and Athens. Was the stretcher Procrustes, and Procrustes had 2 beds that he would offer to passerbys, and one was like short and one was really long, and so people would get into the bed, and when they didn't fit, he would make them fit, either by chopping off parts of their limbs or stretching them like a stretching rack. And because the beds, one was really, really short and the other one was really, really long, nobody fit into either of them, right? Kind of like a Goldilocks. One's too hot, one's too cold, none of them are just right. Fun fact, this one is featured in Percy Jackson and the Olympians. Procrustes is one of the villains that they face in the first book, on the way to the underworld.
If I could comment on Theseus's labors, they're obviously riffing off the Herculean labors.
Well, yeah.
But I feel like, which is funny because this is Athens, like Greek capital of like knowledge and philosophy. I feel like his way of going about these labors was significantly more meat-headed and straightforward than Heracles, who often had to employ like pretty like not always like the most realistic plans, but like he had to employ more cunning, it seems like. Whereas Theseus, like, oh, guys on cliff, I'm gonna push them off cliff.
Yeah, but also the Herculean labors were they weren't all sort of like contests of like strength. Some of the Herculean labors were genuinely like, fetch me this thing or clean these stables, whereas this is he has to fight these 6 people.
Oh, yeah, no, I get that. Like, I get that the labors are different, but I mean, like, as a writer, it feels like the Herculean labors are just the more interesting of the 2 storylines, whereas this is just shown in battle arc.
Well, yeah. So he cuts off Procrustes' legs and decapitates him with his own axe, forcing him onto his own bed, basically.
Telling you, Theseus is a brute.
I mean, he's not a brute. So, having passed these 6 guardians of the underworld and these 6 labors, he arrives in Athens. Once he arrives in Athens, he does not immediately tell Aegeus that he is his son. So Aegeus does give him hospitality, but he's a little bit kind of like, who the fuck is this? Medea, of course, somehow immediately recognizes Theseus as his son. And Medea's worried that Aegeus would choose Theseus over her son Midas. So she tried to have him killed by asking him to accomplish a couple of tasks. The first was to capture the Marathonian bull, which was a Cretan creature and an emblem of the power of the city-state of Crete. So Theseus headed to Marathon, and on the way he stopped off to shelter from a storm with a woman named Hecale in her house. She said that she would sacrifice to Zeus if Theseus was successful in like capturing the bull to bring back. Theseus did, but when he returned to her hut, she was dead. So in her honor, he gave her name to one of the demes of Attica to make all of their inhabitants, in a sense, her adopted children later on when he had unified Attica. Which that's pretty nice of him.
Yeah.
You know? So he returns to Athens with the bull in victory, where he sacrifices the bull and Medea tries to poison him. So just before like she tries to poison him and like it may or may not succeed, Aegeus sees the sandals he's wearing and his sword and recognizes him, kind of knocking the cup out of his hand and uniting father and son while Medea and her son fled to Turkey. And I said, yeah, Asia, Turkey.
Presumably, if he knew that was poisoned, he was in on the plan, too.
In theory,
so,
yeah.
Like, Medea fled, but, like, I get why Medea fled, but also, like, maybe a little family therapy there could have solved the wicked stepmother situation?
You would think, but no. So,
his father wasn't innocent either.
So, Theseus's deeds and the 6 labors and the defeating of the feared bandits on the coastal road from Troezen had preceded him upon his arrival in Athens. So a lot of people knew who he was. They knew of his feats. He was incredibly strong. And this meant that the Palantides, started to worry. They were very worried. Now, Knick-Knack, do you know who the Palantides are?
No.
The Palantides are the collective 50 sons of Pallas, the younger brother of Aegeus. And theoretically, if Medas, if Aegeus' son with Medea, Medas, did not succeed the throne, and Aegeus had no other children, the Palantides one of them would succeed to the throne of Athens, right? Because they're the sons of his brother. However, now there's a new challenger in town for the title. So the Palantides conspired with one another, and they decided to set a trap for Theseus. And which the other thing is, like, I get that, like, yeah, these are the 50 sons of, like, one man, but also, wouldn't they just rip each other apart once they were competing for the throne? Like, my guys, stop working together. It's not going to help you in the long run, because you're all going to turn on one another. So
I also feel like if King Aegeus knew that Theseus, like, he left the sandals on the shield.
Yeah.
If he knew that Theseus is coming, he could have set all these potential heirs up for failure a lot easier.
Yeah, but you also have to think, like, he had no guarantee that his child would survive birth or childhood, right? Because childhood mortality is much higher in this period. So I think that's kind of the... Also, if his son was weak, or if it was a daughter. I mean, he left the shoes and sword, but he told his mother only if he is strong enough to get them himself should he come introduce himself to me. So, like, Aegeus is not exactly Mr. loving and doting father, per se.
No, he's not, but I feel like he set his lineage up for failure here.
Well, the 50 sons are from his brother.
And he knew about that.
Yeah. So, the Palantides decide that they'll separate into a couple of different groups. One group would march on the town from one side, while the other lay in wait near Gargettus to ambush him. Their plan was that Theseus, Aegeus, and the palace guards would be forced out to the front, and then the other half of the group could surprise them from behind. But, obviously Theseus was smarter than them. Informed of the plan, he snuck out of the city at midnight and surprised them. He fell upon them and slew them all. Which, good on him. They were going to kill him, he killed them. Theseus really handles most things with his sword and fists. And I can appreciate that on, like, some level.
I can't. Heracles better.
Heracles also handles a lot of things with his fists.
Yeah, but we at least know he's smart.
Okay. Alright. So that kind of takes care of the succession, obviously. Medas is no longer there to oppose him. The Palantidae are no longer there to oppose him in reality, so he's cemented as the heir of Aegeus and will be the next king of Athens. So, Asterios, the Minotaur. So King Minos of Crete and his wife Pasiphae had multiple children. The oldest of their children, Androgeus, actually headed to Athens to take part in the Pan-Athenian Games, held there every 4 years. So, for those of you who don't know, there are Pan-Olympic Games, basically. The Pan-Athenian Games are one of them. So there's 3 others. So the Pan-Olympic Games, the Pan-Athenian Games, the Delphic Games, and Corinth. I think it's Corinth hosts the other set of games, but either way, every 4 years, they hold the games. So, big, important event, super fucking important event. So, this boy, Androgeus, did really well. He won some events, he was a crowd favorite, which was really funny because he became, and keep in mind, this happens a little bit earlier, right? He was resented by the Palantidae, the ones that were there, and they assassinated him, right? During the Pan-Athenian Games, which obviously incurs the wrath of Minos, the king of Crete, because that's his eldest son.
Wait, Sekhie, can you smell that? It smells like originality in this bullshit Athenian plagiarism scheme.
So, King Minos orders the Cretan fleet to set sail for Athens. Minos asks Aegeus for his son's assassins, saying that if they would be handed to him, they would spare the city. Aegeus did not know who the assassins were, so he surrendered the entire city to Crete.
I'm telling you, this man was a stupid king. He was a moron.
Actually, Crete was one of the great powers of ancient Greece. Athens could not have stood against them in this era. So, what he did was, I mean, obviously for the purposes of the myth, what he did sets up the next part of the story, but also what he did was likely the route that gave the least amount of bloodshed, right? Because if he didn't know the assassins, then he had no one to give up, and Athens could not have fought Crete.
Do you know what every other king put in a rough situation like this would do?
Give up fake assassins?
Scapegoats.
Yeah, well, he was too good for that. He wasn't going to blame someone that
He was a moron.
He was a noble moron.
We're going to find out he's even more moronic later, so...
Okay. So, Minos' retribution because of this was at the end of every great year. A great year is one in every 7 cycles of the solar calendar, so once every 7 years. The 7 most brave young men and the 7 most beautiful young women were to board a boat and be sent as tribute to Crete, and they would never be seen again by the Athenians. There's another version of this story where Minos did actually wage war upon the Athenians very successfully, and in that version it's in 9-year intervals, but it's the same 7 Athenian boys, 7 Athenian girls sent to Crete, right?
Happy Hunger Games.
And these girls and boys were sent to Crete to be eaten by the Minotaur. The Minotaur was a half man, half bull monster that lived inside the labyrinth that was created by the inventor Daedalus in Crete. So on the 3rd of these cycles, whether it be 7 years or 9, Theseus volunteered to go talk to the monster to stop this slaughter. He took the place of one of the young men and set off on the ship with a black sail, saying that if he was successful, he would return with a white sail. When he got onto the ship, he was stripped of all his weapons, and when he arrived in Crete, the daughter of King Minos, Ariadne, fell in love with him. So on the advice of Daedalus, she gave him a ball of thread, right? And this is often represented by a ball of yarn, right? In depictions of the story, but it's a ball of thread to find his way out of the labyrinth. So the thought is you tie off a little piece at the entrance to the labyrinth, and then you just unroll it with you as you're walking, right? Those of us who are smart also know that the other way to get through a labyrinth is, I think, to keep your hand on the left wall at all times, and if you just follow the left wall, you will get out of the labyrinth eventually, because all the walls connect. So it might take you longer, but it will work. But she was like, here, take this thread. This will help. So she takes him to the labyrinth, and he promises that when he returns from the labyrinth, he will take her with him. So ties the ball of string to the doorposts, pulls out the sword that he kept hidden from the guards inside his tunic. Where the fuck did he hide this? I know how big those tunics were. They were not large.
Ye old prison wallet.
Yes! The whole sword.
Theseus was a great man.
Very accomplished. Daedalus had also given other instructions to Ariadne. Daedalus had given other instructions to Ariadne to give to Theseus. Daedalus said, go forward, go down, and never left or right, because that'll be the way to get to the heart of the labyrinth, where the Minotaur lies sleeping. So he comes to the heart of the labyrinth and finding the Minotaur, and a massive fight happens. He obviously is super strong, stabs the beast in the throat, or strangles it, depending on what you're reading, and succeeds. He uses the string to escape the labyrinth and takes all of the young Athenians and Ariadne, as well as her younger sister Phaedra, with him on his escape. So on the way back, they stop off at the island of Naxos. Makes a lovely beer. Highly recommend if you ever travel to Greece. Naxos beer. Really good. So they stop at the island of Naxos, and here Theseus actually abandons Ariadne, where Dionysus would eventually find her and marry her. On his way back, he also stopped at Delos, where he danced with the young Athenians in a dance that consisted of movements that reproduced the shapes of the labyrinth. This dance was called Crane. On his way home, though, he forgot to put white sails instead of black ones, and so his father killed himself.
As you do reasonably.
And the fun thing is, the way that he killed himself was by throwing himself off a cliff at Soanion and into the sea, right? Which is why we call this particular sea the Aegean Sea. Now, I've been to the Temple of Soanion. It's the Temple of Poseidon at Soanion. It's actually a really beautiful site to visit, and I think it's really poetic that he kills himself near a temple to his other father.
Okay, but he didn't even take time to grieve his son afterward.
Oh no, that was his grieving.
He didn't. He could have put in some kind of honor for his son before he killed himself, which would have given both his son extra glory.
Yeah.
And it would have saved him a lot of trouble eventually when he did find out his son lived. Now, I'm telling you, this man was not an intelligent king. He was a shitty moron of a king.
Now, Knick-Knack, I have a really pressing philosophical question for you. How many series do I remove from the channel to replace with new ones before this is no longer the Anime Club channel? You see what I'm getting at here?
No.
Oh. Okay, well, the next section of his life, according to Plutarch, that we should discuss, is the Ship of Theseus.
Oh, yeah. No, okay, I see what you're getting at.
I try so hard. I try so hard.
WandaVision discussion next week.
I would, don't joke. You know I love WandaVision. Just gonna.
Someone forgot to charge their phone from fanfiction last night.
Someone was 4 cups deep of something blue last night. While watching something that they didn't want to remember. So, the Ship of Theseus is the one that we're referring to here, is the one that he used to return from Crete to Athens. So supposedly this ship was actually kept in the Athenian harbor for centuries, right, as a testament to what had happened. It had 30 oars, and it was preserved to the time of Demetrius Phalerius, because they would take away the old planks as they decayed and fell apart and put new and stronger timber in its place as necessary. The ship was maintained at a seaworthy state. In return for Theseus' successful mission, the Athenians had pledged to honor Apollo every year henceforth, so the Athenians would send a mission to the island of Delos, right, which is one of the most sacred sanctuaries to Apollo, on the Athenian state galley, which was the Ship of Theseus, to pay their fealty to the gods.
A lot of honor and tribute for a ship that represents the dumbassery of father and son.
So to preserve the sacred and sort of divine purity of this occasion and the religious mission, during this time period, no executions would be permitted between when the religious ceremony began and when the ship returned from Delos, which would actually take several weeks. But this ship being like replaced bit by bit is what gives rise to the philosophical question of the Ship of Theseus. So the Athenians believed that Theseus was an actual historical figure. The ship gave them a connection to their own divine provenance as Athens and the United Attica, right? So the Athenians were like, this is the Ship of Theseus, right? But nowadays we have what we call like the Ship of Theseus sort of philosophical question, where for those of you who haven't heard of the Ship of Theseus philosophical question, if you take a ship and you, over the course of maybe 50 years, say, replace every single piece of the original ship with identical new pieces, so the ship looks exactly the same, is it still the original ship? Or is it a new ship that looks like the old ship, right? Because it's not that they're building a replica. No, they're replacing pieces bit by bit. The wheel gets a little broken, put a new wheel on. The rudder breaks, put a new rudder on. Some of the hull starts leaking, put a new hull on.
I'm just saying, Athenians managed to create the world's first dupe item glitch.
Getting into, so, I mean, the six labors and the story of the Minotaur form like the core of the Theseus hero legend, right? But it's not the only stories we have of Theseus, right? Because he's connected to a bunch of other figures throughout mythology, and he does unite Attica at a time after this, right? Because he doesn't unite Attica under Athenian rule until he becomes king. So he becomes king now after his father kills himself. So Theseus had a best friend. His best friend was named Pirithous, who was the king of Lapiths. Pirithous had heard the stories of battle, but he wanted proof. So he stole Theseus's entire herd of cattle and basically took it from Marathon, hoping that Theseus would pursue him and show his strength and power. Pirithous met him to do battle, and they were so impressed by one another's gracefulness, beauty, and courage that they took an oath of friendship.
You know, for some reason, gracefulness, beauty, and courage, I feel like it's hard to imagine that with someone who's trying to herd cattle across miles upon miles upon miles while running from another king.
No.
Go, Betsy! We need to go faster, come on!
No. The gracefulness, beauty, and courage were when they were fighting one another.
What did they do with the cows?
They were just off to the side waiting for them to decide the victor.
That sounds like a smelly and noisy battle.
Well, the cows don't care. Anyways, and so after taking this oath of friendship because of their beauty and courage and appreciation of that in one another, they decided to join the Caledonian boar hunt. Right? So, in the Iliad, right, one of the characters, Nestor, calls Pirithous and Theseus those of heroic fame. They were members of earlier generations of heroes of his youth, right? So in this version of the Iliad, right, he says, this character in here says that Theseus and Pirithous exist, but they exist as older heroes, older generation, which is why they're not present in the Iliad. However, there's no actual proof of any oral tradition of Nestor's illusion in the later literary epidemic. So, like, this is where there's that theory that Theseus is created by Athens because there are no Athenians in the Iliad. So, later on in Pirithous' friendship, right, with Theseus, he is going to be marrying to Hippodamia. And at his wedding, he invites the centaurs for guests at the feast. But, the centaurs got drunk and tried to abduct the women at this feast, including Hippodamia. And the Lapiths didn't really like that, so obviously they went to battle, they won. Yay! And in this story, Theseus is also a guest at the wedding, and he kills Eurytus. Eurytus is the fiercest of all creatures. And he's, the fiercest of all centaurs. So he kills a centaur. Congrats. Also, according to Ovid, Theseus at this point had married Phaedra, Ariadne's younger sister, and Phaedra felt a little left out because apparently her husband's love for Pirithous was greater than his love for her in every way. And so
they were best friends.
And historians will call them close friends, besties, roommates, colleagues, anything but lovers. In this case, yeah. So she tried to convince her stepson, Hippolytus, to become her lover, as Theseus had neglected his son for time spent with his male companion Pirithous. So not only did he neglect his wife, but he also neglected his children in favor of his friend. Now, Theseus, so Theseus is the son of Poseidon. Pirithous, unknown to us because I had not mentioned it before, is the son of Zeus, right? And who is a more moral combination of gods than Zeus and Poseidon? The two of them were known as great abductors of women in myth. So they pledged themselves to marry daughters of Zeus. Theseus chose Helen, and they kidnapped her, intending to keep her until she was old enough to marry. And remember, this is Helen of Troy. Just Helen of Troy as a child. You know? And Pirithous decided that he would marry Persephone. She was already married to Hades.
Not a good plan.
Well, so the two of them left Helen with Aethra at Aphidna, where she would actually be rescued by her brothers, the Dioscuri, right? And then they traveled to the underworld to abduct Persephone. Why? So they travel around the outskirts of Tartarus, and Theseus at one point sat down to rest. And as he sat down to rest, he felt his limbs grow stiff, and he could no longer stand up. He had become fixed down to the rock, and he turned to cry out for help from his friend, but Pirithous was also crying out for help from him at the same time. Around them was gathered the Furies. The Furies were the terrible band that tortured prisoners down in Tartarus. Before these monsters, their courage failed, and they were led away to eternal punishment. So, for months, Theseus sat fixed on this rock, unable to move, mourning his friend who had been led away for punishment. Eventually, he was rescued by Heracles during his 12th labor in the underworld. At this point, he persuades Persephone to forgive him for his part in attempting to kidnap her with Pirithous. And he was allowed to leave the kingdom of the dead, although Pirithous never left the underworld. And when Theseus tried to save him, Theseus and Heracles both tried to save Pirithous, and the underworld actually shook, or the stories say, when they tried. So Theseus at this point returned to Athens. Keep in mind, months and months had passed, and found that the Dioscuri had taken Helen and Aethra, his mother, to Sparta. Which, I mean, to be fair, he took Helen first. And I'm sure they weren't treating Aethra that badly, you know? Also, a little bit sus to, like, kidnap an actual child for marriage.
This entire, like, set of circumstances funny is that in some tellings of Theseus, he is an Argonaut, and he would have known both Heracles and the Dioscuri before this.
Yeah. So, Theseus' second wife, Phaedra, bore him two sons, Demophon and Acamas. While these two were still infants, Phaedra fell in love with Theseus' son by the Amazon queen Hippolyta, named Hippolytus. This is the son that he acquired during the Argonaut journey, because they came across the Amazon. Yeah, you get it. Hippolytus, according to some versions, people tell of his story, was a follower of Artemis who had scorned Aphrodite, and so Aphrodite made Phaedra fall in love with him as a punishment. And because he was sworn to Artemis, he rejected her out of his vow of chastity. However, in Euripides' play Hippolytus, Phaedra's nurse told Hippolytus that her mistress loved him, and he swore he wouldn't tell. And because Phaedra wanted to die with dignity, she wrote to Theseus claiming that Hippolytus had raped her and then she hung herself. Theseus believed her and then used one of the curses, like wishes he had received from Poseidon, to curse Hippolytus, which caused his horses to drag his rider to the death. Artemis later told him the truth, swearing to avenge her follower. Seneca wrote a play called Phaedra, and in Seneca's version, after Phaedra told Theseus that Hippolytus raped her, Theseus called Neptune to kill his son, and upon hearing the news of his son's death at the hands of Neptune's sea monster, Phaedra commits suicide out of guilt because she didn't intend for him to die. So, not a great family situation here. Ironically, there ended up being a cult of Hippolytus associated with Aphrodite, where girls who were to be married would offer their hair to him, believing that Asclepius had resurrected Hippolytus and he lived in a sacred forest in Latium. So, according to some versions, Theseus is one of the Argonauts, although according to the Apollonius of Rhodes Argonautica, which is the one that I was quoting for the channel primarily, Theseus was actually still in the underworld at the time of the journey of the Argonauts. Mm-hmm. So also his existence on the journey of the Argonauts is inconsistent with Medea being Aegeus's wife before he even came to Athens.
Yep.
The stories conflict in a way where you could not rationalize them. There's no way for him to both be a member of the Argonauts and for his father to have been married to Medea.
Like I said, Detective Comics versus New 52.
So, yeah. With Phaedra, Theseus fathered Acamas, and Acamas is one of the soldiers who hid in the Trojan horse during the Trojan War, being one of the only named Athenians in the entire story. Theseus also welcomed Oedipus into his kingdom when Oedipus was wandering after the events of Oedipus, the tragedy. And he helped Adrastus bury the 7 against Thebes. And Adrastus was the king of Argos, who was the leader of the band of 7 against Thebes. So he pops up in a bunch of different stories. It's also said that in the case of his death, right, one of the ways that he is said to have died is that the king of the island of Skyros, Lycomedes, threw him off a cliff when he lost popularity in Athens. Because in 475, Cimon of Athens, in response to an oracle, having conquered Skyros for Athens, finally would identify the remains of Theseus, right? A coffin of a huge corpse with a bronze spearhead and a sword. And these remains were reburied in Athens. And then, interestingly enough, so in Athens, in the ancient Agora, there is a temple that you are not allowed to go into, right? And today, it's known as the Hephaestion, or the Temple of Hephaestus. Right, and that's based on modern archaeological research that suggests that it was nearby the main blacksmiths of the Agora, and so it was a temple to Hephaestus, and it was where they came to worship. However, when the temple was originally discovered, and one of the reasons why people aren't typically allowed in the in the Hephaestion today, is because the Hephaestion is the best preserved temple in Greece. It is stunningly well preserved. And I can say that because I did get the opportunity to take a special tour inside of it this year when I was there over the summer. It is typically closed to the public because they don't want it to be like further degraded. But I did get to go inside of it this summer, and it is incredibly well preserved. And originally, when it was identified by archaeologists, they called it the Temple of Theseus, or the Theseon. And for like a good 50 years, it was known as the Theseon, and it was thought to be the burial site of like the coffin of Theseus when he was brought back to Athens. So there's also allusions to him in some parts of the Agora, because like one of the founders of Athens, and obviously in the Agora there's a bunch of like allusions to the founders of Athens. I don't want cold coffee. I'll go get myself a soda in a second. So Theseus shows up in a ton of literature. pops up in Sophocles' Oedipus, Euripides' tragedies Hippolytus, Seneca's Phaedra we talked about. He actually pops up in Chaucer's Knight's Tale from the Canterbury Tales. Here he's the Duke of Athens. There's been several plays written about him in kind of like the medieval and post-medieval period. And he's used often as like just a character in other things that are happening in ancient Greece, which is really fun. There's not a whole ton of like films and stuff with him in it. He's not, there's a ton with Hercules in it, but there's less with Theseus. Although he is in the 2011 film Immortals with Henry Cavill playing him, and he is in the video game Hades. Ooh.
Which is funny, because I think his story is one of the more famous Greek myths.
Yeah.
Like, I'd say it's him, Heracles, and Odysseus.
Yeah, but I think his myth is a little less...
People remember the one good part.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a little less screen-friendly with as much other stuff going around. All right, I'm going to get to Asterios, but I'm going to get another drink first.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. You bastard. Okay. Now getting into the nominally the monster of this episode. The Minotaur.
Let's be honest here. This is the part that everyone remembers from Theseus.
It really is. So is it Asterios or Asterion in Fate?
They say Asterios. I do know it's Asterion in most readings.
Yeah, I was gonna say because it's Asterion in other versions, but it's also, you can just call him the Minotaur, right? So
how dare you?
Obviously, it's the Minotaur. He was born in Crete. He lived in Crete. He died in Crete. His father was the Cretan bull, and his mother was Pasiphae. So he's got siblings like Ariadne and Phaedra, Deucalion, Glaucus, Androgeus, Zenodice, Catrius, Acacallis. Like, he's got siblings. So his name Minotaur it's a compound word. It comes from Minos, right? The name Minos is the name of Minos, king of Crete, right? Because nominally, Pasiphae is the wife of the king of Crete, so he's supposed to be the son of the king of Crete. And then the noun Tauros, meaning the bull, right? Which is where we get Taurus, the star sign. So the bull of Minos, or the Minoan bull, or the Minotaur. He's called Asterion or Asterius, depending on the source. And this is a name that he shared with the foster father of King Minos, which is pretty interesting. Originally, in Greek myth, Minotaur was a proper noun. There is only one Minotaur, but the use of Minotaur, lowercase, refers to an entire generic species of bull-headed creatures, and that's a later 20th century development. So, in Greek mythology, there is one Minotaur. So you can just call him Minotaur or the Minotaur. Hence why we're not calling him one of the Minotaurs or insisting on his name necessarily.
This is not that uncommon for Greek monsters.
No.
Like Medusa also had a similar effect.
Yeah, exactly. So when Minos ascended to the king of Crete, he had done so after competing with his brothers for who would be made the ruler. He prayed to the sea god Poseidon to send him a white bull as a sign of the god's favor. Minos was then to sacrifice the bull to honor Poseidon, but because this bull was so goddamn pretty, he decided to keep him. And yes, I did have to phrase it that way. So he believed that Poseidon would accept sort of a in its place sacrifice. And unfortunately, Poseidon did not. So in order to punish Minos, he made his wife Pasiphae fall in love with the bull.
And what can I say?
Bull.
It's a pretty bull.
Yeah. And let's be real here, Zeus also took the form of a bull when he visited one of his many conquests. So, it's not unheard of. So, Daedalus, right, was basically the craftsman of Crete, right? And nominally he has sort of freedom, but he's also known for being like imprisoned in the labyrinth which was his own creation because he was the only one who knew the secrets of it, right? And that's where you get Daedalus and Icarus flying free, right? And trying to escape. That's not the myth we're talking about today, and I'm sure Daedalus will be a fake character eventually if he isn't already.
He really should be, but he's not.
Yeah. So Pasiphae asked Daedalus to make a hollow wooden cow into which she climbed so that she could mate with the bull. Very Catherine the Great. Or was Catherine the Great very Pasiphae of Crete? Okay. So she then gave birth to the Minotaur. Pasiphae nursed him, but unfortunately he grew in size and became vicious. And because he was sort of an unnatural offspring between a woman and a beast, he had no actual... So, like, he wasn't a carnivore, he wasn't an omnivore, he wasn't an herbivore. Apparently, What?
Nothing. I just yawned. It's bigger yawn than I expected.
Oh. So he couldn't eat normal food. So the only food he could eat was humans. So Minos, following advice from the Oracle of Delphi, had Daedalus construct the labyrinth to hold the Minotaur. And this labyrinth was supposedly near the palace at Knossos. I've been to the palace at Knossos. Not this last summer. I actually went let's say 7 years ago. It ended up being actually a really nice trip. I have some reservations and issues with Sir Arthur Evans and what he decided to do in Knossos, but we won't get into that here. So, the Minotaur is... So, the labyrinth has been constructed, right? So, after Androgeus, when we heard about him, dies... Minos decided obviously the fault lay with the Athenians and demanded the sacrifice of young Athenian men and women. Basically 3 full cycles of sacrifices passed, so depending on whether you're going by 7 years or 9 years, that's either 21 years or 27 years had passed since the first set of sacrifices were demanded. And at this point, we already heard Theseus joins in, yada yada, whatever. So this is how the Minotaur meets his end, right? Either being strangled by the bare hands of Theseus or beheaded by his sword or beaten to death by his club. That's unfortunate, and that's how he died. We already discussed it.
Yeah.
So, Minotaur, obviously the reason why he's monstrous, right, is because he has the head and sometimes entire upper half of a bull, and then the lower sort of either from the neck down or kind of from the waist down, depending on who you look at, who's drawing it, of a human, like a human man. Modern depictions of Minotaurs often just make it like an anthropomorphic bull, so they'll just do like an upright, like basically like a human body, but still with like hooves on the feet, right? And like there's a word for the way that animal back legs work with I can't remember it right now, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So
I think the one that comes to mind immediately is the movie version of Chronicles of Narnia. It has a Minotaur that looks like full bull. Yeah. So like some modern versions kind of go all in on just making it mostly a bull, but if you look at like classical Greek depictions, it is a man from here down. It is only a bull from, like, the shoulders up. It just has the head of a bull. And there is a lot of Greek art. Like, a lot. And some people have said really, really wild things about, like, the origins of the Minotaur and what the Minotaur represented. Like, this one group of dudes from the 19th century, they said that the Minotaur was the personification of the sun itself and an adaptation of Baal Moloch, god of the Phoenicians. And that the slaying of the Minotaur was reinterpreted as Athens breaking tributary relations with Minoan Crete. Look, I mean, at the end of the day, you have to give credit here. The Minotaur is a sick-ass design.
It really fucking is. The Minotaur appears in Dante's Inferno. Specifically, it appears in Canto 12. See, my sage cried out to him, you think perhaps this is the Duke of Athens, who in the world put you to death. Get away, you beast, for this man does not come tutored by your sister. He comes to view your punishments.
Like, let's be real here. This might be the most famous sort of Greek monster.
Yeah, it is the Minotaur. And part of that is helped by the fact that the Minotaur actually appears in a lot of really popular media. Like, the Minotaur appears all over when it comes to actually, like, books, right? But then also, there was the 2006 horror story called Minotaur with Tom Hardy as Theseus. He's also in The Wrath of Titans, and he shows up in Assassin's Creed Odyssey, as well as in Sovereign Syndicate, and Minotaurs are a D&D monster.
Let's be honest here. It doesn't even have to be Greek. If it's high fantasy, usually there's a Minotaur monster at the very minimum, even if it's not the Minotaur.
Yeah, it is an iconic monster design.
All right, so you already know the class of the Minotaur, Asterion,
Berserker,
Asterios.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are you hoping for in design here? I'm curious.
I want an anime girl. I want a little tiny anime girl who just has like a bull-inspired dress and wields like a giant axe or something.
I'm sorry to disappoint you in this case.
Oh, I absolutely know that's not what this is going to look like, but like a cowgirl. Like a cat girl, but with cow ears instead.
Let's just get going, I guess.
Wait, so is Theseus a character in Fate?
Yes.
Oh, okay, so we're just starting with Asterios. Is
Yes.
Asterios the older of the two? Okay, alright. Okay, yeah. I'm not mad. I like it. Don't get me wrong. I like it. I'm gonna be real. I know that like Fate, it's got like a fan service thing, and like this, but I'm kind of disappointed he even has a human face. You know what I mean?
Well, it's kind of because there's a specific approach they go with the Minotaur here that
Okay.
I'll get into.
Right before you do, though, I want to see if they have... Sometimes they have, like, little bits of extra information down here that are interesting. No, not this time.
So, Asterios here is a berserker servant, and yeah, but once the monster of the labyrinth. But in Fate, he's not nearly the monster that myth made him out to be.
Mm-hmm.
During his life, he had accelerated growth, so when King Minos viewed the boy as a monster, it was simply the end result of a child being in a massive hulking body with with monstrous horns.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
So now lock the boy in a maze with no allowance for escape and provide only human sacrifices as sustenance. Fate pins the blame on what happened with Asterios, or the Minotaur, being the monster he was, pretty much fully on King Minos.
Ooh.
Yeah.
What's that from?
I don't know what that specific artwork is from, actually. It should say.
It just says Asterios versus Theseus CG.
It might come from one of the events. But when Theseus arrived and fought Asterios, by the time the fight was over and Asterios was succumbing to his wounds, Theseus actually did take the time to talk to Asterios. And Theseus comes to realize that Asterios is just a boy. A very, very large boy, but a boy. And as it turns out, Asterios hates his existence and hates his father for making him this way.
Yeah, I mean, he's essentially somewhere in the range of, theoretically, at the youngest, 14, and at the oldest, 27, like 21 to 27. And
never given a proper childhood.
Yeah, never really been taught things, never really experienced life.
All he ever wanted was to be free and in the light, but he was locked away as a monster within the labyrinth.
Yeah.
In his final moments, he viewed his death as a release from his suffering, with zero contempt for the hero that killed him. During the events of the Okeanos singularity, Asterios and the labyrinth are summoned, where Euryale would eventually wander in to escape the crews of the Queen Anne's Revenge and the Argo. The two would form a strong bond there, coming into contact with Chaldea eventually, and Asterios would ultimately end up sacrificing himself to protect everyone by dragging Heracles to the bottom of the ocean and providing time for Chaldea to escape the unstoppable demigod.
Oh.
I'm just gonna take a take a moment to just comment that of the early FGO chapters, Asterios may be one of my single favorite servants that were included there and made for them.
Sounds so cute and so sad. All right, I got some relationships. Not too many, actually. With Euryale around, it's so much fun. Aww. With Steno around, Euryale seems to be having so much fun. With Medusa there, Euryale and Steno seem to be having a lot of fun.
Poor Medusa.
It's Theseus. Are you okay? Are you hungry? Oh, good. I love that Asterios calls Circe auntie. Oh, I love it. I'm gonna look at some of these manga panels or whatever they are. Oh, he's in one of the animes?
He's in like one of the flashback sections of Babylonia, or one of the flash forward sections of they might be, I think, no, I don't think he's in a flash forward, but he is in a flashback.
Oh, so sad. Okay. Alright. Okay, I'm into abilities.
So, Asterios is very, very physically powerful and is amongst the physically strongest servants, but in a sea of Greek heroes with their own comparable strength and divine abilities and protections, he can't hold a candle.
He is one demigod amongst many, and a cursed one at that.
Yeah. It's really his fate to always be weaker than the Greek heroes.
Yeah.
His primary means of fighting is the use of 2 axes, which he wields, and I guess together are supposed to be a symbol of the labyrinth. I don't know where that one's derived from, but it sounds like it's derived from something. His noble phantasm is called Chaos Labyrinthos, unless I got it.
Chaos Labyrinthos.
Yes. So Asterios manifests his labyrinth within the world that he can move both him and his enemies into. It acts something like a reality marble, and like a reality marble, Asterios is at his strongest when he's fighting within it.
Okay. I see monster strength, natural demon, that makes sense. The labyrinth of the abyss. Yeah, root of the word. Yeah. Okay. Was it? So this is the person who designed him, Shima Drill, who also designed Charles-Henri Sanson, Coup Alter, Caesar, Lancelot Sabre, and Qin Liang Yu and Theseus. So they're designed by the same designer that we'll see. Okay, so we've got just the one.
Yeah, he is literally a launch character, I'm pretty sure.
Okay. I assume he's had an animation update, but it's not very...
Yeah, he is a 2-star servant, I'm pretty sure. So he doesn't get that much for him.
That's disappointing.
Actually, I don't know if he's had an animation update or not.
Yeah, actually, I was going to say his sprite looks a little...
Little old.
Yeah. Because it's still got that kind of, like, much bigger head.
Like, the only reason his animations look a little bit different than what you would expect for most Year 1 servers is because he's a different size.
Yeah.
So they have to be a little bit more animated.
Yeah.
If they didn't give him an animation update, though, he's not one of the worst Year 1s.
No, it's definitely not the worst.
This is where you see the Year 1 shit.
Yeah.
Oh, it might have been updated. That looked a little bit updated.
Yeah, it's also not the worst at all.
For a 2-star servant, that's fine.
Yeah. Oh.
Well, I guess we'll get into this now.
Sorry.
Meet Minotauros. Within the Greek Lost Belt, Theseus never ventured into the labyrinth to kill the beastly man inside. Oh. Instead, it would remain overlooked by even the gods themselves as anything more than another one of the monsters stored within their lands.
Jesus.
Here, Asterios would grow eternally, growing out of his boyhood and into adulthood. By the time he became an adult, he became a truly bloodthirsty monster. Kerstaria, as the leader of the Cryptors, as a means of assisting Kadok, would find the monster within his lost belt and grant Kadok the Minotaur to help him and the Apostles of the Foreign God take more direct control of the Russian lost belt. Mm-hmm. Kadok had a plan to use the living labyrinth that followed the monster for purposes that we will get back to one day at some point. He would use the monstrous man as a means of muscle that was to some extent lacking for him, with Anastasia being his servant. Mm-hmm. The Minotaur would end up killed in battle, and Chaldea would later discover the remnants of his Greek labyrinth once they arrived in the Greek Lost Belt.
Oh, so he's baby. He is baby. Okay.
just having grown older, he's significantly stronger, but perhaps due to his eternity, he's become far less human and is now more beast than man.
Mm-hmm.
A lack of intelligence ends up being a serious Achilles heel of his.
Okay.
And then he still has Chaos Labyrinth. The only thing worth noting here is that he's able to use it as a living being.
Mm-hmm.
And when he died, it's stuck. The labyrinth sticks around still.
Oh, because it disappears if he's killed, traditionally.
Oh yeah, I do have a boss fight to show you, but we don't have to watch it fully. It's not the
that.
most complicated boss fight. Just so you can see the sprite on the screen, it is freaking huge.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
That
That's
is King
Grandpa
Hassan.
Grandpa Hassan's big as it is. Like, oh my god, could you imagine, like, Steno next to him? Ooh. Ooh.
I'll also count, I think Theseus does actually reconcile with this version at some point in one of the events, but I could be wrong. I haven't actually read the story of that.
I mean, to be fair, it does look really cool.
Yeah.
Alright.
Alright, so next we get into Theseus. He's actually relatively new. He's just this last year, very recent.
Theseus.
Class, what are you thinking?
So, based on his backstory, ruler makes sense, but I don't think he'd be a ruler personally. Like, it just, even though like he's this great mythological king, unites all of Attica, he just doesn't feel like a ruler servant to me. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I'll say rulers, while you do get some kings, a lot of the times
they have
rulers,
other stuff.
You're leaning more towards saints or leaning more towards people that just don't have very many wishes of their own. Yeah,
there's other stuff. He doesn't really fit. I would say saber because of the sword, but I mean, he's kind of just as famous for using like his bare hands to brutalize things.
So archer.
I mean, I feel like I should go saber. I feel like saber is the logical choice in my mind.
You'll be happy to know you are correct this time.
Okay, saber.
Yep, meet Theseus Saber.
Oh.
I will say he's actually capable of being a rider class servant too, and he was almost the rider of Fate prototype. We just haven't seen that version of him, but that would be like where you get your Ship of Theseus shit.
Yeah, I love how his first one just has the club, you know?
Mm-hmm.
That's still a club. That's not a sword. Also, one titty out.
One titty out. You get to see a man titty.
Who's the character from the Argonauts with the assless chaps? The thighs out.
Jason?
Yes! It's very Jason-esque in its design, you know? Thighs out for God, titties out for God.
So Theseus
hey,
here...
God, I don't know which God.
Theseus...
Wait, hold on. Does he have... He has personal information. Okay. So he likes telling heroic tales, being talked about as a hero. He dislikes himself. Okay. And this does give him as an Argonaut. Okay, so that's what this is following, I guess?
Yes, this is going to follow... This is actually going to call into question whether or not Medea was actually the woman that he encountered there. It's going to like reason out that it was a different woman, but he did at some point sail with the Argonauts.
Okay. All right.
So Theseus as a saber class servant has been mentioned multiple times across Fate Grand Order before ever making his appearance. Theseus in Fate is one of the kinder heroes in the Greek lineup. Don't get me wrong, he has some blemishes, namely the kidnapping of an Amazonian and the abandoning of Ariadne. Not good looks, dude. But in the case of Ariadne, at least, he does provide something of an explanation, being that she did not want kids, and while he respected her wishes, but he couldn't just as someone who cared for her.
Yeah, but why'd he abandon her on a deserted island with no? Because that's the thing. Ariadne is not abandoned in like a town or a city or like somewhere where she could like continue. She's abandoned on a deserted island.
Look, I don't know all the details. Ask Theseus yourself.
Okay, all right. Well, she ended up married to a god, literally the party god. So arguably, she got the better deal out of the two of them.
Yeah, like it's single, no kids. That's a great deal right there. Marry the party god.
Single, no kids, constant wine parties, hallucinations. And she didn't technically have to have kids with him either.
But as a king, he did want to make sure he had kids.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's where things went south. But on to Asterios, that encounter. Theseus knew immediately that Asterios wasn't a straightforward monster the moment they met. Mm-hmm. And he viewed Asterios as a human and provided words of comfort to him as he passed away. Asterios and he have a friendly relationship after they're both summoned, but various characters, including Circe, are not so pleased with his explanations on how he murdered one of her relatives and abandoned the other. Whoops.
I wouldn't be either.
As a side note, Fate says Theseus was an Argonaut, and it's unclear whether the woman he met that married his father was indeed the same Medea that from the Argonautica.
Okay. So I see some relationships. We've got Asterios. No, I'm just a normal guy, a passerby. I have nothing to do with a true hero like you. Not fooling you? Drat, I should have hidden my face. Hey, Master, that's the Greek goddess Euryale, right? Why is she always glaring at me? Huh? She's a servant close to Asterios. I see. That's great news. Yeah, truly. He really needed at least one person who understood him. If I had any relation to the witch of Colchis, some legends say I do, but didn't Medea tell you that she doesn't remember much of it? Then that's either someone else with that same name, or these events didn't matter to either of us. And then, to any Argonaut servants, long time no see, guys. Nice to see you're still doing fine. The Argonauts, how nostalgic. Is Jason still annoying as always? Great. I'm glad things seem to have stayed the same.
So Theseus is wrong part of my notes. Theseus is considered by Jason to be the only member of the Argonauts that can match Herc. He is a saber-class servant, but he's really down to pick up whatever weapon he can find and use. He's not unlikely to just straight up steal his opponent's weapon in the end. He's a master fighter in that regard, and that's all while using the thread of Ariadne as one of his primary armaments.
So I see personal skills. There's Ariadne's prayer to help him reach the right path. Instinct Labyrinth. Okay, martial retribution. And then he's got two noble phantasms. The first is Ariadne Aporito Adis, which is the thread of Ariadne.
The way this one works is that the noble phantasm will guide Theseus to a way to defeat his enemies. When it wraps around them, it shows Theseus how to defeat them, even as it does nothing to actually restrict their movements. The path to defeat them, though, will never be the most straightforward one possible. It will always be the most perilous one possible that Theseus is not guaranteed victory in.
Because that's what he chose to do with his 6 labors, which is incidentally his second noble phantasm, Discolia Spera.
This noble phantasm is a powerful counterattack obtained as a result of the 6 labors. It functions kind of like God Hand, supposedly reflecting an enemy attacks back at them. When they strike Theseus, it's unknown what restrictions may be placed on it, though, or like how powerful it may be.
I also see the explanation for the rider possibility, that he was the rider servant of old Fate replaced by Perseus in Fate Prototype.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense then. Alright, we've got a... Oh yeah, he's very new.
He's a 3-star, by the way. He is shockingly easy to get, and he's pretty good.
Yeah. He's got some cool moves, too. I love that they've just gone brute force club with him. Like, sword? Nah. Elegance? Nah.
Theseus is a brute. Yep. I don't understand where the beauty and elegance part of that one skill came from.
I think him and Perithus were just a little too into one another. They were telling tall tales. You know?
I mean, one is Theseus and the other one was running with cows.
And wanted to kidnap Persephone. Remember, that was Perithus' choice.
Look, just remember that between the two of them, Heracles is the smarter one.
Yeah. I love that. I love that for Heracles. I love his little swinging,
Swinging on the thread.
Very Spider-Man, you know?
This is actually my brother's favorite servant.
I mean, it's a cool fucking servant. It's a cool design. And I like that they've kind of reconciled him with the people that, like, in myth, he, like, technically did wrong, you know? Or, like, killed or so. Like, it's a nice redemption in Fate to make him, like, a genuinely, like, a character who did, like, some terrible things, but, like, he didn't have much of a choice.
I do like when Fate tries to reconcile the original. Not always make it, like, Jason does not reconcile the original myth and make it better, but they do. But I like how Fate likes to unravel some of the conflicting tellings or mismatched characterizations.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no, that's not straightforward at all. Nice.
Yeah. Got some CEs now.
That's a nice ass NP. All right, not just CE, but hold on. First of all, his noble phantasm is written in Greek. Interesting. Okay. All right, gallery. Because we should have, a Grail League, batter up. That's adorable. And a Dream Strike. Fuck. Do you really want to go up against that as a goalie? Do you want that? What you're facing is he would just block the entire goal with his body. You'd never get through. All right, he's an older servant, so I'm wondering if he has any. He does have some cute little extra art. It's small, but that's adorable. Let's see. Okay, so there's some wallpaper stuff that's like, so you can see like in full, right?
You don't know everyone there.
No, I don't, but I just figured I'd open it because it's the full size. Yep. I'm sure we'll see like a smaller version of it later. Grail front, white castle by day, black castle by night.
That's the event that introduces Theseus.
Yeah.
That's coincidentally also one that introduces Ptolemaeus, but we'll get to that one day.
Yeah, we actually have an idea for Ptolemaeus. We took an idea from someone on stream, actually. We are going to be doing all of the Ioniae Heteroi in more detail when we do Ptolemaeus eventually. Okay.
Fun fact about Ptolemaeus. My brother and I made a Ptolemaeus servant prior to Ptolemaeus being introduced, so we now have to kind of eventually go back and rectify that a bit.
Yeah. Alright, lightning reindeer. It's Christmas. People call me the lightning fast reindeer tank. I can promise delivery within 1 day of your letter. I can also stand in as a Christmas tree, so hurry up and order yours today. Wow, that's a quicker delivery than Amazon promises these days. Ariadne's thread. There exists a natural evil at the end of this. There exists a devourer of men, a Minotaur. As he tries to hide his fear, a man proceeds through the labyrinth with what little courage he has. He thinks he might die here. He thinks he might be lost in here forever. He thinks he might get eaten by the Minotaur. However, he didn't know the monster was a human boy who desperately tries to be punished as a monster. The end is nigh for both of them. Oh. So cute. So sad. Labyrinth map. A Valentine's return gift. A complete map of a certain labyrinth. It shows everything from stairs and treasure chests to warp zones. With this, you could probably escape without taking a big ball of yarn with you. But during your journey through the labyrinth, beware of encountering deer or praying mantises. La siesta! So there's that. So you've got, Sekhie, Cathpelug. Shh. That's what we're calling it. There's Coulter. There's Coulter, obviously. I love that Asterios is cuddling plushies of Coulter and the Prison King.
Edison?
Yeah, thank you. I've been trying to remember his name since I opened this art just now. Sweet dreams. Sometimes that's what's needed. A servant who remains a child at heart and a servant who acts like a child share a leisurely nap time. The Mage of Flowers paints a colorful dream for them. Oh. There's also a doll of Jason. Oh, yeah, right there. They're sleeping on it. That's adorable. All right, I remember Belle of Society, and it's just the horns you see in the background
here. We
here.
don't need to come back to this one.
Yeah. Heroic Spirit formal dress. That is a pool floaty. That is a goddamn pool floaty, guys. This is not a okay. Phantom Knight. We've actually gone over this one before because we've done it with several servants now. But now I know who this character is. Yeah. Because they are called phantoms and monsters on a daily basis, Halloween is the one time they can come out and shine. It's okay if kids cry because their costumes are all in honesty a bit beyond the pale. The goddess's grace is given equally to all. Heroic Spirit traveling outfit. Asterios. That's adorable. White Garden. I mean, it's somebody else's CE, but he is in the background there. Do I know who CE that is?
I don't think so.
Okay, then I'm going to skip it for now.
Yeah.
Illuminating the Veil of Darkness. Aww. I got a feeling I know exactly who this is, and so I'm not going to read this CE.
There's not a lot of choices as to who that could be.
Well, it could really only be one character without being offensive. So, oh my goodness, look at the big balls of yarn and the knitted plushie. I want one. I want one. It's his Valentine's.
It actually might be Theseus's.
It might be. Yep. Good. Okay, then we'll be back to it. It's adorable, though. We are going to be back to it.
Yeah.
Yeah? Yeah. Okay. Theseus.
Sooner rather than later.
Ironically, we don't have a Grail League. We only have a Dream Striker because he's newer than the Grail League. Yeah. Yep. Isn't that? I think that's the first time we've had that officially.
For Dream Striker versus Grail League? Yeah, I think so.
He's got the ball of thread holding there's a little lion. That's cute. It's cute. Yeah, there was not going to be much. There's 3. But that's fine. That's plenty enough. All right, red thread of guidance. Obviously, we know what this is, but we should still... I agree. It was because of this thread that I was able to survive. Thread is something that connects edges and binds edges together. But there is one caveat. This visualizes the connections between people, and just because there is no red thread does not mean there are no connections. If I could live my life as I was guided by this thread, I might have lived an easier life. Still, I want to continue to cherish the invisible connections and the connections that I don't know whether they will exist or not. So, Master, please be careful when using it. Most of all, he's the one who has been so close to me. I have a lot of trust in that area. I like how they're incorporating kind of the red thread of fate as well. Like tying lives together. That's pretty cool. Stuffed toy! Oh my goodness. So this is a Valentine's return gift. Amigurumi made with ordinary thread to avoid magical movements. The subject is, of course, Asterios. It has a delicate construction befitting the elaborate Theseus, but it does not have any magical effects. Furthermore, she's very popular with child servants, and when they come to play in my room, she is often hugged. This is adorable. Alright, smooth sailing! Hey, friends! It's Herc! And Jason! And, yeah, because he's got a little Jason on his... Also, what do you see here? Evil eyes. Alright, y'all. Listen up. I am not particularly a religious person. If there's one thing I believe in, it is the evil eye. I was raised with the evil eye. I believe in evil eyes. I brought evil eyes back for all of my friends when I went to Greece. You have an evil eye.
Yep.
That you should have hung up in your apartment somewhere. I don't know
if you have. I
hung
it up as best as I could.
But you should, because it's good. I like that they've got the different colors of yarn, too, because it is now a trend that they do the evil eyes in colors that aren't blue as well. So you get, like, yellow, red, pink, green, and you can get, like, the bracelets and stuff. I do think it's hilarious that Herc is just tangled up in the fucking yarn in the back. Also, pretty sure that this is set in Santorini by the scenery behind them. But I guess we'll see at the bottom. Oh, this is voiced.
魔除けってやつはいくつあってもいい。俺のような勇者には嵐がつきものだからな。よし、そいつもいただいていくとするか。
いや、水難はともかくとして、女難については保証しかねるんだが、あとこの糸の送り先はもう決まっているんだ。
We sew through the waves stitch by stitch to prevent our precious bonds from fraying. It doesn't matter how many amulets you have. Storms are a part of being a hero like me. Okay, I guess I'll take those as well. Well, aside from water damage, I can guarantee against female disaster. I can't wait. Also, I've already decided where to send this thread. Difficult. I wish you all the best on your voyage. And... okay, it doesn't say where it takes place, but I'm gonna be honest, I think it's set in Santorini. Aww, there's some extra art. Okay, I'm here for this set of bros. Just like hanging out. You know what I mean? Especially like doing crafts, hanging out. I'm here for this. This is great. This is adorable. I mean, I wish Asterios was here too, because that would make this like the perfect picture, but you know, it's great.
Yeah, I think Theseus was fantastically handled in Fate.
Like, yeah,
because like a lot of this stuff even predates his inclusion in the games. I'm glad that you have stuff like this, which just makes him seem like a pleasant person to be around.
Yeah, it's adorable.
So there was a CE that we did. The next servant we're covering is like in that CE one of the only servants we haven't covered yet.
All right. We'll see you next time. Happy spooky season.